If you've ever been to an air show or event like EAA's AirVenture in Oshkosh, you've probably had the chance to see history flying right before your eyes. A Warbird is any ex-military airplane flying today, and they can range from a Stearman biplane all the way to a MiG-17. Many of these planes are 80 plus years old, and it got me wondering who the pilots are that fly these amazing aircraft. Now, there are only a handful of Warbird pilots in the world, and if you're like me, you have no idea how one even becomes qualified to fly one. I had the opportunity to fly with the Aeroshell team in a T-6 at AirVenture this year, and my pilot was a retired Delta Airlines A330 captain. Now that is a cool retirement job. So who are the men and women flying these amazing aircraft so many decades later? Here's what you need to know. Now, for anyone out there who dreams of flying or owning a Warbird, you know that it's pretty expensive. For you guys who play video games, I found this game called Warpath that gives you the chance to experience the strategy required to command a group of airplanes in combat. They've made the production of this video possible. For something you can do right from home, I think Warpath does a good job challenging players to win the skies in over 40 historic aircraft. Click the link below to try flying each airplane. Let's get started. There are three categories of Warbird pilots: owner-operators, volunteers, and those flying Warbirds as a job or career. Some pilots are a combination of all three, and it's one of the most tight-knit groups of pilots you'll find in the world. Most current Warbird pilots got started through family experience, but fortunately a number of groups are working hard to bring more pilots into the ranks from ground zero. There are a number of organizations like the Commemorative Air Force, EAA Warbirds, and numerous flight museums that provide incredible support to keep Warbirds and their pilots flying. Believe it or not, but you can't just order a broken part for your B-17 Superfortress online or find many pilots qualified to fly one. Volunteering in the Warbird community, along with plenty of networking, is your best shot at getting involved if you ever want to fly a Warbird. You can find CAF chapters all over the country, which is how many aspiring Warbird pilots get started. Learning to fly Warbirds is a multi-year process, and almost every pilot gets started just like they did 80 years ago before World War II. You can expect to start in a tandem seat tailwheel like a Citabria or L-19 Bird Dog, progress to a Stearman biplane, and then build a lot of T-6 Texan time. The T-6 is a 5,000-pound, 650 horsepower trainer airplane with a radial engine that was first built in 1935. It's the gold standard for building experience flying historic aircraft due to its size, complexity, and availability. Some pilots fly the T-6 for their entire Warbird career, and others build experience in this massive trainer to move on to more intense training required to fly a P-51 Mustang, F-4U Corsair, or a B-25 Mitchell. If you want to fly fighters, you'll need over 150 hours of T-6 time, and if you want to fly bombers, you'll need twin radial time from something like a Beech 18. Depending on where you're flying, aircraft insurance requirements will likely determine how much experience you need to move up to the next biggest, more complex airplane. Before we talk about how to get checked out by the FAA in one of these airplanes, it's worth noting just how few Warbirds there are flying today. Out of the hundreds of thousands of Warbirds built during conflicts like World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, there are only a few hundred left flying today. The Commemorative Air Force has the largest Warbird fleet in the world and still only has around 180 active aircraft. And as you can imagine, Warbirds are extremely expensive to purchase, operate, and maintain. A flyable P-51 built in the 1940s recently sold for $4 million. When they were first produced, each aircraft cost around $50,000 or $500,000 in today's money. Now, if you want a taste of flying these amazing airplanes in battle, but don't have $4 million to spend on a P-51, Warpath gives you the chance to strategize in real time with other players online as you fly the skies in an authentic war-like experience. Try upgrading and rebuilding your weapons loadout to dominate the sky and win the war. The new air-to-ground attack gives you the most lethal way to win against your opponents. From fighters to bombers, there are over 40 types of aircraft that you can fly, including the renowned P-51 Mustang and B-17 Superfortress. I don't play many video games myself, but Warpath is pretty cool if you want the experience of a real-time competitive strategy game with Warbirds.
Some of the enemy interceptors are blasted out of the battle zone. Despite opposition, the bombers push on deeper into enemy territory, their progress mapped by vapor trails. In formation, the bombers can lay down a deadly pattern of protective fire.
Okay, back to pilots flying the real deal. We talked a little bit about the training required to get started flying Warbirds, but what about the FAA Checkride? As you can probably guess, getting certified to fly a Warbird is a pretty big deal. The FAA has established something called the Vintage Experimental Aircraft Program, which covers vintage type certificated aircraft requiring a type rating, experimental turbine-powered airplanes, aircraft with a max gross weight of over 12,500 pounds, and experimental piston-powered airplanes with an engine over 800 horsepower and a VNE speed over 250 knots. Most of the famous Warbirds that you've seen at air shows fall under one of these categories. While there's no nationwide curriculum to get checked out in something like a Corsair, flight museums and the CAF have built rough training templates to help pilots get type certified. Once you've gained all of the experience necessary, the checkride itself will be conducted with a specialized FAA examiner. There are only a handful of examiners in the country experienced enough to give Warbird check rides, so it's not like you can just show up at a local FSDO to meet with a DPE. An oral knowledge exam for these aircraft can last 4+ hours. Most of the Warbird fighters flying today are single seat, which means that your first flight in the airplane is also your first solo flight. And the check ride won't have an examiner on board with you in these types of airplanes. The examiner will observe you fly from the ground as you conduct normal, abnormal, and emergency landings and demonstrate stalls from a few thousand feet in the sky. That's just another reason why learning to fly these airplanes is so incredibly unique. When I visited EAA's AirVenture this year, I had the opportunity to get a taste of Warbird flying in the backseat of a T-6 Texan during an aerobatic demonstration. It was one of the coolest aviation experiences I've had to date and felt like a step back in time over the loud roar of a T-6 radial engine. Okay, but enough talking, here's what it was like. Museums are great, but there's just nothing like riding in one of these airplanes firsthand. If you want to fly in a Warbird, you can find rides at many air shows around the country. You can also find flying opportunities through the CAF and flight museums that actively operate aircraft. The time and dedication it takes to become a Warbird pilot is more than impressive. So I'd like to thank the men and women who've dedicated years of their lives to keeping these planes in the air for generations to come. And thank you again to Warpath for making this production possible. Not everyone gets the chance to fly a Warbird every day, but all of you can experience the strategy required to win the skies right from home. It's a pretty cool game, so I've included a link in the description below for you to download the game today. That's all for now, and thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future videos, leave me a comment below. There's a lot more coming soon.